The Annual Postcard. Chapter 1. The Echo of Grief. The salty air of Ocean City, Maryland, usually brought Lisa Martin a measure of peace. The rhythmic roar of the Atlantic, the distant cries of gulls, the endless horizon. These were the constants in a world that had felt irrevocably shattered 5 years ago. Now, at 55, a quiet woman with kind eyes and a librarian's meticulous attention to detail, Lisa lived a life steeped in the echoes of profound loss. Her best friend, her other half, Sarah Blake, was gone. The official report was grim, succinct. A tragic single-vehicle accident on a remote, winding road deep in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey, far from any logical destination Sarah might have had. Her car, a sturdy, unremarkable sedan, had veered off a forgotten track, plummeting into a ravine, found days later by a lone hiker. There were no witnesses, no skid marks, no clear explanation beyond a vague mention of mechanical failure or driver fatigue. But Lisa had never believed it. Sarah, adventurous and spontaneous though she was meticulous about her car, almost superstitiously so. And the location? It simply made no sense. Sarah had been on her way to visit her elderly aunt in Baltimore, a routine trip. The Pine Barrens were hundreds of miles off course, a labyrinth of forgotten roads and shadowed forests. Each year, on the anniversary of Sarah's death, October 17th, Lisa retreated. She'd close her small, cozy beachfront cottage, turn off her phone, and walk the desolate stretch of beach, letting the cold spray of the ocean numb the persistent ache in her chest. She remembered Sarah's infectious laugh, her wild ideas, her uncanny ability to find magic in the mundane. Sarah had been the spark, the fire, the chaotic joy to Lisa's methodical calm. Their friendship, forged in college over shared obsessions with obscure literature and ancient cryptology, was the anchor of Lisa's adult life. And now the anchor was gone, leaving her adrift. This year, however, October 17th, brought something different. A jarring, impossible intrusion into her carefully constructed grief. The postman, a cheerful, ruddy-faced man named Frank, who knew Lisa's routines, knocked gently on her door. "Mrs. Martin? Package for you, ma'am. Looks like a postcard." Lisa signed for it, her hand trembling slightly. A postcard? No one sent postcards anymore. People texted, emailed, video called. As she turned it over, her breath hitched. The image on the front was a vivid, almost impossibly blue lagoon, fringed by impossibly white sands and swaying palm trees. A place she'd only ever seen in travel brochures. But it was the back that froze her blood, the handwriting, bold, elegant, with that distinctive flourish on the capital S, and the looping tail on the G. It was unmistakably Sarah's. "Dearest Lisa, the sun here is blinding, the water clear as glass. Wish you were here to see it. Perhaps next year a different horizon awaits. Look for the singing stones. Remember the old rhymes. The game continues. Always, S." No return address. Just a stamp from a tiny island nation she barely recognized on the map. And the postmark, October 15th, barely 2 days ago. Lisa sank into her favorite armchair, the postcard clutched in her hand. Her mind raced, swinging wildly between disbelief, rage, and a terrifying glimmer of hope. This had to be a cruel, elaborate joke. Someone, some twisted individual, knew about her and Sarah, knew about their shared love for cryptic messages, their childhood games of riddles and treasure hunts. But who and why? She scrutinized every inch of the card. The paper felt authentic, not a cheap reproduction. The ink, a deep blue, hadn't smeared. The postmark was crisp, undeniably real, officially stamped from a place called Vanuatu. Vanuatu. Sarah had always dreamed of visiting the South Pacific. But Sarah was dead. Lisa had seen the death certificate, attended the closed casket funeral. She had cried until there were no more tears left. This was impossible. Her mind, usually so logical and orderly, began to fray at the edges. Was it a posthumous prank? Had Sarah, in her wild, eccentric way, somehow arranged for these postcards to be sent? But how? From where? And what did singing stones and old rhymes mean? Their childhood was filled with made-up adventures, but these phrases felt different, more urgent. The grief, which had settled into a dull ache, suddenly flared into a sharp, agonizing pain, laced with confusion. This postcard wasn't a comfort. It was a disturbance, a ghost in the mailbox. And Lisa, despite her fear, felt an undeniable pull, a whisper of Sarah's adventurous spirit reaching out from beyond the grave. The game, as Sarah had written, continued, and Lisa, against all reason, felt compelled to play. Chapter 2. The Annual Enigma. The first year, Lisa dismissed the postcard as a macabre prank, a cruel joke by someone who knew too much. She tried to forget it, to rebury the unsettling questions it raised. But the image of the impossibly blue lagoon, the unmistakable script of Sarah's hand, kept pulling at the edges of her consciousness. She even consulted a retired local police officer, a kind, grizzled man named Captain Miller, who listened patiently but offered little solace. People do strange things, Lisa, especially when they're grieving or trying to make sense of loss. Maybe a mutual friend, trying to keep her memory alive in a unique way, he suggested. But the raw, unadulterated shock in the pit of Lisa's stomach told her otherwise. This was no ordinary act of remembrance. Then, exactly 1 year later, on October 17th, another postcard arrived. This one depicted the jagged, snow-capped peaks of the Himalayas. The postmark read Nepal, and again, the elegant, familiar handwriting. Dearest Lisa, the air here is thin, but the views are breathtaking. Found the highest prayer flags. Remember the climb and the view from the top. The truth waits at the pinnacle. Don't forget the constellations. Forever, S. Lisa's hands shook as she held it. 2 postcards, 2 different remote corners of the world, 2 identical dates, exactly 1 year apart. This was no longer a random prank. This was a pattern, a deliberate communication. But from whom? And how? Her logical mind, trained in the quiet order of a library, rebelled. Sarah was dead. Bodies didn't send postcards. But her heart, still raw with unspent grief, whispered a different truth. This felt like Sarah. The playful challenge, the enigmatic clues, the deep, underlying affection. Over the next few years, the postcards continued to arrive with an unsettling regularity. On every October 17th, a new glimpse into a faraway land, a new cryptic message. Year 3. A bustling market scene in Marrakesh, Morocco. The spice of life, the hidden souk. Follow the scent of cinnamon and betrayal. The path is not always straight. Trust your instincts and the old map. Year 4. The ancient ruins of Machu Picchu, Peru. Stones speak if you listen. The Inca knew secrets of transport. The past is not always buried. Look for the missing piece. The golden bird flies at midnight. Year 5. The desolate beauty of the Australian outback. Red dust. Ancient spirits. Sometimes you have to burn the past to grow anew. The horizon holds a warning. The boomerang returns. Each postcard was a masterpiece of subtle misdirection and tantalizing clues. They were never overtly personal, never mentioned their shared history directly, yet every phrase, every image felt uniquely tailored to their inside jokes, their shared intellectual pursuits. Singing Stones, a reference to an old book they'd read about geological phenomena. Old Rhymes, a nod to their childhood game of rhyming riddles. Constellations, their shared fascination with astronomy and celestial navigation. Hidden Souk, an old map, a reference to their shared love for historical puzzles and cartography. Golden bird flies at midnight, a phrase from a favorite adventure novel. Lisa spent hours, then days, then weeks, poring over maps, atlases, and her old books on cryptography, a hobby she and Sarah had indulged in during their college years at the University of Baltimore. She'd always had a knack for patterns, for deciphering hidden meanings. Sarah, however, had possessed a nearly genius-level intuition for them. The clues were elaborate, almost maddeningly so. They were not simple substitution ciphers. They were a complex tapestry of literary allusions, geographical coordinates hidden in seemingly random numbers, historical facts, and personal jokes. It was as if Sarah, anticipating her disappearance or death, had constructed an elaborate treasure hunt, designed only for Lisa to follow. Lisa finally knew she couldn't keep this to herself anymore. The postcards had become too real, too urgent. She needed help, but who would believe her? She thought of the lead detective on Sarah's case, Detective Robert Grant. He was a gruff, no-nonsense man, nearing retirement, who had seemed utterly bewildered by the strange circumstances of Sarah's accident. He had dismissed the minor inconsistencies as the chaos of the road. With a deep breath and a pounding heart, Lisa dialed the number. She reached him at his home. "Detective Grant, this is Lisa Martin, Sarah Blake's friend." There was a moment of silence on the other end. "Ah, yes, Mrs. Martin. A tragedy. How can I help you? I'm retired now, you know." "I know," Lisa said, her voice trembling slightly. "But it's about Sarah. I've been receiving postcards. From her." Another longer silence, then a skeptical chuckle. "Postcards? From a deceased person, Mrs. Martin? I understand grief can do strange things. But no," Lisa interrupted, her voice firming with conviction. "You don't understand. This isn't grief. This is real. The handwriting, the postmarks, the messages, they're codes, detective. And I think Sarah was trying to tell me something about what really happened to her. Something she couldn't say." Detective Grant, a man of logic and procedure, was intrigued despite himself. He had seen stranger things in his long career. Though rarely so bizarre, he agreed to meet her out of curiosity, if nothing else. He arranged to meet her at a small, unassuming diner in Baltimore, near his old precinct. He arrived with a wary look in his eyes, clutching a lukewarm cup of coffee. He was a man accustomed to cold facts, not ghostly mail. "Show me these postcards, Mrs. Martin," he said, his voice gruff, his skepticism palpable. He didn't believe in the supernatural, or in the dead sending mail. Lisa carefully laid out the collection of postcards on the worn formica table. The bright, exotic images seemed strangely out of place in the mundane diner. As Daniel spoke, her voice steady now, resolute, explaining the dates, the handwriting, the increasingly complex clues. Detective Grant picked up each card, turning it over in his hand. His brow furrowed. He pulled out a pair of reading glasses, studying the postmarks, then the script. "The postmarks are legitimate," he admitted, a note of surprise in his voice. "Vanuatu, Nepal, Morocco, Peru, Australia. All real, all stamped from those locations. That's unusual, very unusual. And the handwriting, you're certain it's hers?" "Absolutely," Lisa said, her voice unwavering. "I've known her handwriting for 35 years. No one could fake that flourish, that slant. And the personal allusions, they're only comprehensible to me. They're inside jokes, Detective. Clues only I would understand." Detective Grant leaned back, stirring his coffee slowly. "So you're suggesting what? That Sarah Blake isn't dead?" "That she faked her death and is sending you postcards from around the world." He sounded incredulous, but there was a flicker of something new in his eyes, genuine bewilderment. "I don't know what I'm suggesting, Detective," Lisa admitted, her voice cracking slightly. "It defies logic. But what if it's not about her being alive? What if it's about what she knew? What if these are posthumous messages, a dead man's switch, a trail she set up in case something happened to her?" Detective Grant considered this, his gaze fixed on the Machu Picchu postcard. A dead man's switch. That's a novel concept for a civilian. What was her profession? "She was an independent researcher," Lisa explained. "Worked on various projects, often dealing with historical documents, old maps, sometimes even for private collectors. She loved mysteries, puzzles, anything that needed uncovering." Grant hummed, a new line of thought forming. Independent researcher, uncovering secrets, and an accident in a very remote, unusual location. "All right, Mrs. Martin, this is a long shot, but I'll admit it's intriguing. I'll dig out the old case files, just for you, just out of curiosity. No promises." Lisa felt a surge of hope, a fragile flame in the darkness. "Thank you, Detective. That's all I ask." The game, it seemed, had just gotten a new player. Chapter 3, The Lighthouse Cryptogram. With Detective Grant's reluctant but crucial involvement, Lisa felt a renewed urgency. She returned to the first postcard, the one from Vanuatu. "Look for the singing stones. Remember the old rhymes. The game continues." The phrase "singing stones" had always perplexed her. It didn't fit any of their usual inside jokes or literary references. But old rhymes, that brought her back to their childhood, specifically to their summers spent on the Maryland coast, exploring abandoned places, their imaginations running wild. There was an old, disused lighthouse on Assateague Island, a short drive from Ocean City. It was a crumbling relic, long abandoned, mostly off-limits to the public, nestled amidst wild ponies and whispering dunes. As children, they had often dared each other to explore it, making up ghost stories and hidden treasures. And Sarah, with her boundless imagination, had composed a series of nonsensical rhymes about the lighthouse, chanting them as they played. One particular rhyme, a silly song about the wind howling through the broken panes, referred to the lighthouse as the stone that sings. Lisa felt a jolt. Singing stones, the lighthouse. Could it be? It was a wild, long shot, but after 5 years of inexplicable postcards, wild shots were all she had left. She packed a small backpack, flashlight, water, a worn copy of her favorite adventure novel, a dog-eared map of Assateague Island, and a sense of trepidation mixed with exhilarating purpose. The island, usually teeming with tourists, was quiet now in the autumn chill. She navigated the sandy tracks, past the wild ponies grazing peacefully, until she reached the rusted gate of the old lighthouse grounds. The no trespassing sign was faded but clear. Ignoring it, driven by an unshakable conviction, Lisa slipped through a gap in the fence. The lighthouse stood before her, a skeletal finger pointing to the sky, its windows shattered, its metalwork corroded by years of salt and wind. The air inside was cold, damp, and smelled of decay and salt. She shone her flashlight around the base. Nothing, just rubble, dust, and the silence of forgotten dreams. She began to ascend the spiraling metal staircase, each step groaning under her weight, a symphony of rust and protest. The wind whistled through the broken panes of the lantern room at the top, creating an eerie, almost musical sound. The stone that sings. This was it. In the small, cramped lantern room, the air was surprisingly still, sheltered from the direct force of the wind. Dust motes danced in the shafts of weak sunlight that pierced the grimy glass. Lisa's flashlight beam swept across the circular room. There, tucked behind a loose brick in the crumbling wall, almost invisible beneath a thick layer of dust and cobwebs, was a small, leather-bound book. Her heart pounded. It was Sarah's. Lisa recognized the distinctive tooling on the spine, the slightly worn corners, the faint scent of old paper and something else. Rosemary? Sarah had always kept dried rosemary between the pages of her favorite books. She opened it. It was a copy of the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket by Edgar Allan Poe, a book they had both devoured in college, fascinated by its mysteries and its ambiguous ending. But this wasn't just a copy. It was Sarah's personal, annotated copy. The margins were filled with her distinctive handwriting, cryptic notes, underlined passages, geometric drawings, and what looked like more coded symbols. On one page, a drawing of the lighthouse itself, with lines emanating from it, pointing to unseen directions. And on the final page, a single clear phrase written in black ink. LM, the game is not what it seems. Seek the missing brother. He holds the key. Lisa gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. LM, her initials, the missing brother. Sarah's younger brother, Tommy, had disappeared nearly 25 years ago. A troubled teenager. He'd run away from home after a bitter argument with their parents, and despite extensive searches, he was never found. His disappearance had deeply affected Sarah, haunting her for years. This was no prank. This was a direct, personal message from Sarah. Left for her, years ago perhaps, a message that predated the postcards. Sarah had been preparing for something big, something dangerous. Lisa carefully secured the book, clutching it tightly as she descended the winding stairs. The wind outside seemed to howl louder now, a mournful song that no longer felt accidental. She had found the first piece of the puzzle, and it opened a terrifying new door. Chapter 4, The Detective's Files. Back in her cozy cottage, the scent of sea salt now mingling with the musty smell of old paper and dust, Lisa pored over Sarah's annotated copy of Poe. The book was a treasure trove of information, but it was also a labyrinth. The coded symbols were more complex than anything she had encountered on the postcards. They weren't simple ciphers. They were a unique blend of literary allusions, geographical coordinates disguised as page numbers and line counts, and what appeared to be astrological charts integrated into historical timelines. It was a masterpiece of cryptology, designed to be understood only by someone who knew Sarah's mind intimately, someone like Lisa. The phrase, "Seek the missing brother, he holds the key," echoed in her thoughts. Tommy, Sarah's younger brother. His disappearance had been devastating for Sarah. She had spent years, even after she was an adult, trying to find him, convinced he was still alive. Their parents had given up, resigned to his loss, but Sarah never had. Had she found him? Was his fate tied to hers? Suddenly, a particular detail in the latest postcard, the one from the Australian outback, resurfaced in her mind. The boomerang returns. Was it a simple metaphor or another clue? The next postcard arrived, as always, on October 17th. This one depicted the eerie, mist-shrouded ruins of an ancient Irish monastery. The postmark, Ireland. The message, written with Sarah's usual elegant script, seemed less cryptic, almost a direct instruction. Dearest Lisa, the stones remember. The silence speaks volumes. Sometimes the answers are hidden where you least expect them. Look in the files where trust was misplaced. In the records of the past, a strange mechanism hums a silent song. Tell Grant the truth waits in his own papers. He will see the missing thread. With hope, S. Tell Grant the truth waits in his own papers. This was a direct, unmistakable command. And a strange mechanism hums a silent song. This was a detail that stirred a faint, unsettling memory from the police report. Lisa called Detective Grant immediately. He answered, his voice gruff, as if he expected another wild goose chase. Martin, anything new from your deceased friend? Yes, Lisa said, her voice steady, confident now. Something very new. The latest postcard tells me to tell you that the truth waits in your own papers. Specifically, in the records of the past, a strange mechanism hums a silent song. Do you remember anything about Sarah's car? Anything unusual at the crash site beyond the standard damage? There was a long silence on the other end. Lisa could almost hear the gears turning in his logical, skeptical mind. A mechanism? He finally said, his voice slow, thoughtful. Well, there was something. An anomaly. Didn't make it into the final report as a contributing factor. We found a small device, heavily damaged, lodged under the chassis near the rear axle. Dismissed it as debris. Or maybe something from the car itself, broken loose. But it wasn't a standard car part. It looked like some kind of custom-built casing. Strange. Why would I remember that after 5 years? Because it was unusual, Detective. Lisa pressed, her heart pounding with a desperate hope. It didn't fit. You knew it then, subconsciously. Can you find the original notes? The detailed inventory of the crash site? Reluctantly, but with a new glimmer of curiosity, Detective Grant agreed to meet her at the police archives in Baltimore. It was a dusty, cavernous place, filled with the ghosts of forgotten crimes. He located the enormous cardboard box labeled Blake, Sarah, case number 98217, fatal accident. Inside, among hundreds of photos of a mangled car, detailed diagrams of the ravine, and witness statements that said nothing, he found it. A small, crumpled, almost illegible sketch by a junior officer, depicting the mysterious device. Here it is, Grant said, his voice hushed, a note of wonder in it. My God, I completely forgot about this. It was written off as incidental, unknown metal casing, likely road debris. But it's clearly some sort of mechanism. It doesn't belong. The sketch showed a compact rectangular device, about the size of a brick with several wires protruding from it, connected to a small, corroded battery pack. It had what looked like a small antenna and a series of delicate, almost clockwork-like gears and levers on its surface. It was clearly not automotive. This is what she meant, Lisa whispered, tracing the lines of the sketch. A strange mechanism that hums a silent song. It's not something that would cause an accident. It's something that was used in one. Used for what? Grant asked, his skepticism now replaced by a genuine, bewildered curiosity. A bomb? But there was no explosion, just impact damage. "No, not a bomb," Lisa replied, a chilling thought forming in her mind. If it were a bomb, there would be a different kind of damage. This device, it looks like it's designed for communication or for activation. What if it was used to simulate an accident, to make it look like a crash? Grant stared at her, his jaw slack. Simulate? You think she faked her own death? But why? And how? "I don't know why yet," Lisa said, looking at the sketch, then at the Ireland postcard. "But if she faked her death, these postcards are her way of telling me she's alive and telling me why. The missing brother, Tommy, the key, it all connects." A wave of emotion washed over Lisa. Profound shock, dizzying hope, and a terrifying realization that her entire understanding of Sarah's death, of the last 5 years of her grief, had been utterly wrong. Sarah was alive, or had been, at least, when those postcards were mailed, and she was in profound danger. The game was no longer a nostalgic puzzle. It was a desperate plea. Chapter 5: The University Archives. The revelation about the mechanism in Sarah's car sent a jolt through Lisa and Detective Grant. His initial skepticism had evaporated, replaced by a grim determination. "All right, Mrs. Martin," he said, tapping the sketch with a practiced finger. "Let's assume your friend is a master illusionist. Why fake her death? And what does this missing brother have to do with it?" Lisa explained Tommy's disappearance, a source of lifelong pain for Sarah. Sarah never stopped looking for him. She believed he was alive, even when everyone else gave up. She always said he was special, too smart for his own good, but vulnerable. The next postcard arrived, as predicted, on October 17th. This one was from the ancient, wind-swept plains of Mongolia. The postmark, Ulaanbaatar. The message, "Dearest Lisa, the open steppe holds ancient knowledge. The true path is carved in silence. The library always knows the final answer. The last key rests where you first learned to decipher secrets. Remember the whispering shelves and the scholar's ghost. Almost there, S. The library always knows the final answer. The last key rests where you first learned to decipher secrets." Lisa's mind raced. The university library in Baltimore, where she and Sarah had met, where they had spent countless hours studying cryptology, history, and ancient languages. Lisa had even worked there part-time in the special collections section during graduate school. The whispering shelves, their private joke for the hushed, dusty stacks of rare books. The scholar's ghost, a reference to an eccentric old professor who had taught their cryptology class. Armed with this new clue and the unwavering support of Detective Grant, Lisa sought permission to access the university archives. Her old supervisor, a kindly but strict archivist named Dr. Eleanor Vance, recognized her immediately. "Lisa, my dear, haven't seen you in years. What brings you back to these hallowed halls?" Lisa explained vaguely that she was doing research on a historical family project, needing access to specific rare books from the early 20th century. Dr. Vance, though curious, granted her access. The special collections reading room was exactly as Lisa remembered it. Hushed, dimly lit, filled with the scent of aging paper and leather. The whispering shelves stretched to the ceiling, filled with volumes that held centuries of knowledge. Lisa began her search, guided by the cryptic clues from the postcards and Sarah's Poe book. The specific passages, page numbers, and even the unique way Sarah had underlined certain words pointed to a particular section, rare books on ancient trade routes and forgotten languages. Hours turned into a blur of dusty pages and hushed concentration. Then she found it, tucked within the pages of a centuries-old atlas. A map of obscure maritime trade routes was a small, thin, leather-bound journal. Its cover was blank, unassuming, designed to blend in with the surrounding books. But the paper felt different, almost silken. Her hands trembled as she opened it. It was Sarah's. Lisa recognized the faint, familiar scent of rosemary, infused into the pages. And inside, written in that unmistakable script, was Sarah's meticulously detailed, utterly shocking, and heartbreaking confession. The journal began with Sarah's lifelong search for Tommy. After years of dead ends, she had finally found him, not dead, but alive, and in terrible danger. He had indeed run away, but he had fallen in with a charismatic, dangerous group of individuals who, under the guise of an archaeological collective, were actually a sophisticated network of international antiquity smugglers. They used old trade routes, forgotten ports, and complex, layered ciphers, many of which Sarah, ironically, had helped them decode as an unknowing consultant to move priceless, often stolen artifacts across the globe. Tommy, brilliant but naive, had become deeply entangled, unable to escape. Sarah had spent the last 2 years of her life, or what Lisa had thought was her life, working undercover, infiltrating the network, trying to gather enough evidence to expose them and free Tommy. She had learned their methods, their communication patterns, their routes, even their dead man's switches, protocols for communicating if a member was compromised. The car accident in the Pine Barrens had not been an accident at all. It was Sarah's desperate, meticulously planned escape. She had known the network was closing in, that her cover was blown. The mechanism under the car was a sophisticated, custom-built device, not for a bomb, but for a remote-controlled explosive charge designed to simulate a catastrophic impact, destroying the vehicle and any evidence within, while allowing her to escape undetected moments before. She had used her knowledge of local geography, the remote, untracked roads, and the desolate nature of the Pine Barrens to execute her plan. The postcards? They were Sarah's dead man's switch for Lisa, a series of pre-written, pre-addressed postcards, carefully mailed by an automated system or a trusted, distant accomplice, designed to reach Lisa annually, slowly providing clues. Sarah had known Lisa's unique intellect, her love for puzzles, her unwavering loyalty. She knew Lisa would be the only one to understand, to follow the trail. The postcards were her insurance policy. If Sarah survived her escape, they were a way to eventually reach out, to confirm she was alive, and to ask for help when it was safe. If she didn't survive, they were meant to be a posthumous cry for justice, a path for Lisa to expose the network and potentially save Tommy. The journal continued with increasingly frantic entries. Sarah and Tommy had been on the run, hiding in various safe houses around the world, using their knowledge of the antiquities trade to stay one step ahead of the smugglers. But they were running out of options, out of money, out of places to hide. The golden bird flies at midnight from the Machu Picchu postcard wasn't just a literary allusion. It was a specific code for a particularly valuable, recently acquired, and highly dangerous artifact that the smugglers were desperate to obtain. The boomerang returns from Australia referred to a trap Sarah had set, using her knowledge of their communication methods to send them on a false trail. The final entry in the journal, dated just a few weeks before the most recent postcard, was chillingly direct. It contained a set of precise coordinates, a remote, abandoned fishing lodge in the wilderness of British Columbia, Canada, and a plea. Lisa, if you are reading this, I'm out of time. Tommy is sick. We are cornered. The last postcard contains these coordinates. It's the final riddle. Find us, please. The game is almost over. Bring help. There is so little time. They know we have the golden bird. This is our last stand. My last hope is you. Lisa's hands trembled so violently she could barely hold the journal. Sarah was alive. All these years of grief, of mourning a ghost, had been a cruel illusion. But she was in grave danger. And Tommy was with her. They were cornered, sick, desperate. The coordinates, the last postcard. It had been mailed from Mongolia, but pointed to British Columbia. A deliberate misdirection. A final layer of protection. She looked up, her eyes meeting Detective Grant's across the dusty reading room. His face was a mixture of profound shock and a dawning understanding. He had read over her shoulder as she deciphered the last entries. "My God," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "She really did it. She faked her own death. All this, it was a setup. A masterpiece of deception. And these coordinates, we have to go. Now." His skepticism was gone, replaced by an urgent, almost desperate conviction. The grizzled, retired detective had found a new, compelling case. A chance for true justice, a chance to right a profound wrong. Chapter 6, The Final Riddle. The journey to British Columbia was a blur of frantic planning and whispered phone calls. Detective Grant, with his network of contacts and his official, albeit retired status, pulled strings. He convinced the RCMP, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, to conduct a discreet welfare check, providing just enough information to convey the urgency without fully revealing the astonishing truth about Sarah's staged death. He framed it as a missing persons case, a lead on a high-profile, long-lost individual who might be linked to international antiquities theft. Lisa, fueled by adrenaline and a desperate hope, traveled with him. The flight was long, the air thick with unspoken fears. Each hour that passed felt like a lost opportunity, a step closer to a terrible fate for Sarah and Tommy. The coordinates led them deep into the vast emerald wilderness of British Columbia, to a remote, abandoned fishing lodge nestled beside a pristine, glacial lake, miles from the nearest road. The setting was breathtakingly beautiful, but ominously silent. As they approached the lodge, a dilapidated wooden structure, partially hidden by towering pines, a profound stillness settled over them. The air was cold, crisp, carrying the scent of pine needles and damp earth. Detective Grant, ever the professional, signaled for caution. He and a small team of RCMP officers approached the lodge silently, weapons drawn. Inside, the scene was one of desperate survival. Sarah and Tommy were there, huddled by a makeshift fire, their faces gaunt, their clothes worn. Tommy was visibly ill, shivering uncontrollably despite the fire, his skin pale, his eyes sunken. Sarah, though frail, immediately recognized Lisa, her eyes widening in disbelief, then flooding with relief. "Lisa," she whispered, her voice hoarse, weak. "You came. You actually did it." Lisa rushed forward, throwing her arms around her friend, tears streaming down her face. It was Sarah, alive, tangible. The years of grief, the agonizing void, suddenly collapsed into an overwhelming surge of joy and relief. "Sarah! Oh my God, Sarah! You're alive!" Detective Grant, witnessing the emotional reunion, stepped forward. "Sarah Blake, I'm Detective Robert Grant. We need to talk, and your brother needs medical attention immediately." Sarah nodded, her eyes fixed on Lisa, a look of profound gratitude passing between them. "I knew you would understand, Lisa. I knew you'd figure it out." Later, as Tawny was being tended to by paramedics and Sarah, though weak, began to explain everything to Detective Grant and the RCMP. The full, harrowing scope of her 2-year ordeal unfolded. After staging her death, she had gone underground, using her old contacts from the antiquities world to find Tommy, who had indeed been trapped by the smugglers, unable to escape. The organization, led by a ruthless figure known only as the Collector, had discovered Tommy's value as a decipherer of ancient texts and a navigator of obscure routes. They were holding him captive, exploiting his unique skills. Sarah's accident was a desperate gamble. She knew they were onto her. It was the only way to disappear, to sever all ties, to buy time to rescue Tommy and expose the Collector. The postcards were her lifeline, her final ingenious plan. She had pre-written them, using her knowledge of hidden communication networks and automated mailing services to be sent annually. Each card was designed to push Lisa further down the rabbit hole, to activate her unique skills, and ultimately to lead her to Sarah if she survived, or to continue the mission if she didn't. The coordinates on the last card were a beacon, a final, desperate plea when they had nowhere left to run. The golden bird was a priceless Mesoamerican artifact, recently stolen, that the smugglers were planning to move, and Sarah had managed to intercept it, giving them a bargaining chip, but also making them a prime target. Detective Grant listened intently, his face grim. "A sophisticated criminal enterprise," he muttered, making notes, "using ancient texts and cryptology for smuggling, and a woman willing to fake her own death to save her brother. Remarkable." Tommy, recovering slowly, confirmed Sarah's story, his voice weak, haunted by his captivity. He explained the psychological manipulation, the threats, how he had been forced to use his talents for their illicit gains. He was terrified, but finally free. The RCMP moved swiftly. With Sarah's detailed information and the Golden Bird artifact as evidence, they launched a massive international investigation. The Collector and several key members of his network were eventually apprehended, their intricate web of smuggling finally dismantled. Chapter 7: A New Horizon. In the weeks and months that followed, life slowly began to piece itself back together. Tommy, though emotionally scarred, began a long road to recovery, surrounded by the belated love and support of Sarah and Lisa. Sarah, physically exhausted but spiritually renewed, embraced her second chance at life. The world believed she had died, and for now, that suited her. It offered a unique kind of freedom, a fresh start. She maintained a quiet, almost reclusive existence, working on her art and helping Tommy heal. Lisa's cottage in Ocean City, once a place of quiet grief, became a sanctuary of shared laughter, whispered conversations, and new beginnings. The constant ache in her chest, the hollow feeling of loss, had vanished, replaced by an overwhelming sense of gratitude and an exhilarating purpose. Her best friend was alive. The hole in her heart had been miraculously mended. Detective Grant, initially just a skeptical observer, found a profound new meaning in his retirement. He had been instrumental in dismantling a significant criminal enterprise, and he continued to serve as a quiet, unofficial advisor to Sarah and Lisa, a bridge to the legal world when needed. His logical, orderly mind, once focused solely on cold facts, had been stretched and challenged by Sarah's incredible tale, opening him to the extraordinary. He often visited, enjoying Lisa's strong coffee and Sarah's insightful conversations. Sarah and Lisa, bound by an unbreakable bond, forged in shared secrets and unimaginable peril, found themselves looking towards a new horizon. Sarah's expertise in ancient texts and hidden communications, combined with Lisa's uncanny ability to decipher complex patterns and her methodical approach to research, formed a powerful, almost unparalleled skill set. They realized they had a unique calling. We could help people, Lisa," Sarah suggested one rainy afternoon, curled up on Lisa's sofa, a mug of steaming tea in her hands. "People who are missing. People who are trapped in complex situations where conventional methods fail. We could uncover hidden truths. We could be silent detectives of the past." Lisa, a quiet smile playing on her lips, nodded. "A private investigation firm, but for the impossible cases. The ones that involve codes and obscure history. The ones where others have given up." And so, the Echoes Agency was born, operating discreetly from a small, unassuming office above a quiet bookstore in Annapolis, Maryland. They became a unique force for truth. They took on cases that baffled conventional law enforcement, mysteries shrouded in forgotten histories, encrypted messages, and seemingly impossible disappearances. They used their combined skills, their shared passion for puzzles, and their deep understanding of the human spirit's capacity for both good and evil. The house in Ocean City, once a monument to loss, was now a vibrant, living testament to resilience. It was no longer for sale. Instead, it became their peaceful sanctuary, a place for respite and reflection after their demanding cases. The bay window that Daniel Thorne had gazed out of, unknowingly standing in the presence of a profound secret, now overlooked a garden that bloomed with vibrant colors, tended by Lisa's hands. The whispering shelves in the university archive held not just academic texts, but the silent testament of Sarah's journal, a testament to her courage and her enduring bond with Lisa. The annual postcard tradition, once a source of agonizing grief, transformed into a private ritual of remembrance and triumph. No longer a message from the presumed dead, but a playful reminder of their unbreakable bond, a symbol of a life rescued from the brink. Each October 17th, Lisa would find a beautifully illustrated postcard on her doorstep, hand-delivered by Sarah herself, always from some new, unexpected corner of the world. Perhaps a quiet cafe in Paris, a bustling market in Cairo, or a serene temple in Kyoto. The message would be simple now, no longer cryptic, but always heartfelt. "Dearest Lisa, another year, another adventure. The sun is shining, the future is bright, and the game, my dear friend, has only just begun. Always, S." The echoes in the walls of the old Mercer house, once filled with unspoken sorrow and dark secrets, now resonated with the vibrant hum of life, the quiet thrill of discovery, and the profound joy of a friendship that had defied death itself. Lisa Martin, no longer just a librarian haunted by loss, but a courageous seeker of truth, had finally found her peace, her purpose, and her best friend, who against all odds had returned from the grave to live a life more extraordinary than she ever could have imagined.